What are recovery loans and why are they so helpful, especially in early recovery? Now, you might think I'm talking about literal financial loans, and there is kind of a pun intended in talking about this topic because I realize that recovery from sexual addiction and sexual betrayal can be very expensive between therapy and groups, the books, intensives, all that kind of stuff. Some people really literally do need to take out a loan, but I am not talking about a financial loan here. What I am talking about is the concept of, especially in the early days of recovery, when we need to borrow from others' experience, strength, and hope. So here are some of the things that we often need to take out a loan on or have loaned to us from another person who's ahead of us on the journey. I'm going to start with hope. And one thing I sign all of my emails and I end all of my videos to the women in my betrayal trauma recovery groups with is the phrase, I am holding out hope for you. Because most of the time, people that have gone through sexual betrayal have no hope for themselves. Or if they do have hope, it feels like a mountain that is insurmountable. And so sometimes we have to borrow hope from other people before we can have hope for ourselves. Even after we do have hope for ourselves, there are times and there are days, as you know, if you're in recovery, where we feel so low, where things are so difficult that we don't have any hope for ourselves. So when I look at, let's say, my small group facilitator who's been on this road ahead of me, or I know one of my dear friends heard my story earlier on in my recovery journey, and watching what had happened in my life was what she needed to borrow in order to be able to move forward and have hope for herself. Sometimes it's kind of like how God needed to send Jesus as the exact representation of his likeness in human form so that we could know that he does relate to us, so that we could see a true expression of God and who he is. Sometimes watching other people on the recovery journey ahead of us gives us the embodiment of what it is that we're shooting for. What can we have hope for in recovery? So for example, if I don't have any faith or hope that my husband could actually recover and stop acting out sexually, but I see other women in my group whose husbands have totally stopped acting out sexually. In fact, they've become a completely new person. I see this happen all the time. Well, I can borrow the hope from that other person. Now, certainly, I don't know the outcome of my situation. And so there may be women who don't get that outcome. They end up getting divorced because their spouse does not stop acting out. Nevertheless, they're able to see other women in their group on stages ahead of them, or other facilitators of their groups who have gotten divorced, but they're okay and they're thriving. And that hope is so powerful. And sometimes we just need it on loan until we can create it for ourselves. Other things that we need to take out on loan in early recovery is self-compassion. So, I don't know about you, but once I started peeling back the layers of the onion of how I was treating myself in early recovery, I realized, oh my gosh, I am super self-critical, super like non-accepting of myself and not able to have compassion. And so I remember this time that I was berating myself over something, and my sponsor, Misty, she said to me, be nice to my friend Kristen. She's been through a lot. And I had her voice in my head. She loaned me her compassion for me. And I took her words, I held them in my heart, and I let it start to give me what I needed as a deposit to start to build a new way of speaking to myself, a new way of showing myself love. I mean, Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And we're often totally leaving out the element where he says to love ourselves, especially in the way we talk to ourselves. And the final example I'm going to give you guys of how we need to take out recovery loans sometimes is with our faith. lots and lots of partners, and I imagine a lot of men with unwanted sexual behavior, women with unwanted sexual behavior, end up having a crisis of faith as a result of what they've gone through. Meaning they start questioning God's goodness, His love. They start maybe questioning even, does He exist at all? Does He care? And one thing I had to borrow early on in my recovery experience was, wait a minute, maybe my whole perception of God is wrong. And what I started realizing is that I did view God as punitive, as judgmental, as critical, and those were not really God. It was old voices in my head. It was based on my own trauma and experiences. And so in some ways I had to like fire my old God. It was the image I had of God. Because God Himself, of course, never changes. But I had to borrow faith that I saw in other people of the relationship they had with God, which was more based on love and joy and certainly obedience to Him, but more of an obedience out of an overflow of love and relationship without all the punitive, critical, punishing garbage. So the other way that we need to often take out a loan with faith and watching how God comes through for other people, how He takes care of them, how He takes the most horrible situations and turns them into good. And a lot of times the lie we'll believe is, well, like He's doing that for them, but He won't do that for me. That's definitely a lie that I believed. But over time, I started seeing God show up for me in small ways. Sometimes I had to borrow the wisdom of other people in recovery who were able to say, oh my gosh, that happened? Like, that seems like God. Or look at how God showed up for you in this. And it was this whole new shift in my perspective on what was actually happening. I may have interpreted it in the past as God not taking care of me or not loving me, and that would have destroyed my faith. Instead, I had people around me who were able to point me to the fact that, like, you have all these incredible ways that God is working in your life. They opened my eyes and encouraged me in my faith to believe that He was going to come through for me, even in my darkest moments. So let me ask you this. Who do you have in your life that you could borrow from? We don't usually like to think about going into debt. This is not the kind of debt that is bad. This is the kind of interconnected, interdependent, healthy connection that we need from other people who've walked the recovery path for us. If you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to leave the names of the people that you are borrowing your hope from, your faith, your self-compassion in the comments below. And until next Friday, I am holding out hope for you.